Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Should be a long webinar, but stick with it and ask as many questions as you can, and we will get through them all. Just quickly, just a bit about me, so you understand where I'm coming from. I am I like to refer to myself as a reformed engineer and a marketer, which gives me a bit of a combination of the digital technical skills and the marketing skills. I've actually got 18 years web development experience, which is a lot, especially when you put it in a number like that. I'm now really old. But my recent experience has been in content management systems like WordPress, Drupal, and also the shopping cart system Magento. So I'll cover a little bit of specifics to WordPress and Drupal during the webinar. But if you're using a different content management system, feel free to sing out and we can answer specific questions about those as well. So just what we want to cover today, the first thing we want to quickly look at is what is your website trying to do? Then we want to cover some basics of accessibility. We won't have time to go into a lot of depth, but we'll provide you with some follow-on resources. We'll have a quick look at content management systems and how they can help you with your website. We'll look at how to prepare images for the web and what you should be looking for when you do that. We'll also be looking at whether your domains are set up correctly, because there's a couple of people on this webinar that I check their websites out overnight and they're not. So that'll be really useful. Having a look at whether your website is consistent in structure and content. Some of the basics of mobile. You may have seen that Google have just made a change to their algorithm, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about website structure, and finally we'll go into a deep dive on Google Analytics and what it can do and how to set it up. Hopefully everyone on here has already set it up, but we'll cover it quickly and see how we go. If you need any more in-depth information or anything, sing out and we will help you out with that. Now, we're actually doing a second webinar I'll talk about a bit more at the end on SEO on Friday, which will also be free. So I've left a bit of SEO stuff out of this webinar, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, join us on Friday. So let's start by actually asking the question, what is your website trying to do? Often we worry about getting content on the website, getting images on the website, putting things we think are important on the website, and over time they can grow into something that has everything that we need on them but doesn't necessarily appeal to the audience we were originally conceiving. In putting all the different content we need on there, we may have made it harder to use. And one of the most common things is making it harder for your visitors to decide what action you want them to take when they first go to your website. And also, is it accessible for people with disabilities? We'll talk a bit more about accessibility in a minute, but we need to make sure that our websites, particularly in the not-for-profit sector, are accessible for people with disabilities and follow some guidelines. Now, let's have a look at an example and just pull it apart a little bit. This is World Vision's relatively new website. Now, I picked this as an example. You may be a small organisation, you may be a big organisation. It's important to understand that the structure and the design of your website does not necessarily need a big budget. There's lots of things that we can do on very small budgets with the existing websites we've got. Now we can have a look at the World Vision website and we can see straight away that, I think my mouse works, yes. We have contact details and a donate button right up the top here. And then, being that this is in English, we would read left to right, and the first big picture is sponsor a child. And that is one of the key activities that World Vision want you to take out of visiting this homepage. Notice that there are no sliders, there's no motion here, so it sends a good, clear message that this is what we want you to do. Sure, there are secondary behaviours, but if somebody arrives here and reads left to right, they're going to start with sponsor a child. if somebody arrives here, doesn't read left to right, and is attracted to a picture of the bricks, then they're still going to take an action. They're going to look at the information about how to stop child labour. It's really easy to go here and to see there's a behaviour to take. So after the webinar, go and have a look at your own websites and have a look at, if you go to the website, maybe ask some friends, some people outside of your organisation is always really, really useful. Have a look at your website and go, is it actually clear what I want you to do here? Or just ask them, what do you think is the key message on our homepage? And if they can't answer or they are having trouble with it, then time to have a look at how you can restructure that. In some cases, it may be as simple as putting a couple of extra links or buttons in a key location on the homepage. In other cases, it might require a bit more of a structural shift, but it'll be worth it in the end. Any questions on that so far? No? No worries. Now, being that we are in the not-for-profit sector, a number of the people who will visit our websites may have a disability of some sort. And W3, the World Wide Web Commission, have put together some web content accessibility guides for us all to follow. And I put some basic points there. Now, the thing I love about the web content accessibility guidelines is, in general, they also follow good SEO principles, good search engine optimization principles, because somebody who is blind can't read what's on your website without a screen reader, and a screen reader is going to read out the content of your website, and that means that they can't read videos and images. So they need text alternatives for non-text content. Now, funnily enough, search engines use robots and spiders to comb through your website and have a look at your content. They can't read images either. So having those text alternatives for non-text content is an excellent way to both optimize your website for people with disabilities and optimize your website for search engines. The other thing with these accessibility guidelines is that they also cover some of the basic good design principles. Things like good contrast between your foreground and background colours. So that might be your text, or it might just be menus and buttons and things. So that needs to be contrasting for people who have vision impairment but aren't completely blind. And that's also going to be attractive for people who are visiting your website who are disabled. We want good design so that they can easily go through it all. And along with those design principles, also avoid designing in a way that is known to cause seizures. We've done a bit of a 360 when it comes to implementing web stuff, in terms of, you know, a long time ago we got animated GIFs and they flashed really fast and we could do heaps of cool stuff with them. And when we got them, everyone just suddenly started using them until we realized that they weren't that great for the overall effectiveness of our website. So then we moved on to Flash, and we used to have these great animated introductions to our websites which added no value to our website and quickly became known as skip intros because everyone skipped them as fast as they can. We've sort of moved past those kind of trends, so it's not such a big deal anymore, but it's important to just keep that in mind, that fast motion, changes in colours, common seizure triggers are important to avoid. Also ensure that sufficient time is allowed for people to perform behaviours on your website that you want them to perform. So that might be that you want them to donate, but you've got a limit on the amount of time in their session, the time from when they start the donation process to when they have to finish it, and if they don't have enough time, they won't complete it. Now, they may not care so much, they'll go and donate to somebody else, but that's important for us to make sure that we optimize that so that they can still get involved. Now, I've written here to avoid PDFs. It's not so much the case anymore that we need to completely avoid PDFs on websites, but they need to be correctly marked up for the web. If they're not correctly marked up, they can't be read by screen readers, and they can cause an accessibility issue. 10 years ago we would have said avoid them completely because search engines and people with disabilities couldn't read them at all. That's not really the case anymore, but you do need to make sure that you put some time into making sure that they are accessible and they are correctly marked up. And one other thing that we often miss is making sure that forms on our website can be used by keyboard control only. So that's for people who may have trouble using a mouse, or they may be using some kind of voice activated method of using the website. Go to the sign up forms and the donation forms on your website and just make sure that you can fill it out just by typing in details and pushing tab to switch between fields, and that's going to help accessibility, and it's also going to help search engines. Now, I've put a link there. We are going to send the slides out at the end of the webinar. Those are some basic high-level principles to follow, but you can find out a lot more at that quick reference guide that I've linked there, and we'll send that out after the webinar. Especially if you're dealing with, people who are vision impaired, you're probably already following these guidelines, but really important just to give yourselves a refresher and make sure that you can follow those. Now, just quickly, I just want to talk about content management systems. Most organisations these days will be using a content management system. Some aren't, so I just want to quickly cover what they are. I guess the key principle of a content management system is that it separates the content, the design, and the functionality. So you can download the functionality from people like WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla, and you can install their content management system on a web server, and the functionality is then maintained separate from the content and the design. Once you've set that up, you can add the content to the content management system's database, and the content management system will manage the content. But we then have the ability to increase the functionality as time goes on, and we also have the ability to change the design without having to completely redo the content like we used to have to do with basic HTML. So that's great because we can redesign a website with usually no work required on content, sometimes a little bit, and we can put all of that effort now into the design and the functionality. Now, some of the things that we'll talk about later on in this webinar and we'll talk about on Friday, there are modules available that will help you with all of this. People have already built the functionality that you need. So you can install a search engine optimization module which will help you with following guidelines. You can install shopping carts which are already built and customize them to your requirements. And there's also image galleries, and there's a range of different things that you can do with your website. The big three, I guess, are WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. Hopefully everybody's using one of those, but they're really good because they are free and open source. If you're not very happy with your web host, you can move without lots of problems. And there's lots of development around them, so there's lots of plugins available. I think we have a question.
Yes, I've got one question here. We're currently using Joomla, but as non-tech savvy people, finding it a little tricky. Which QMS would you suggest we move to that is easy to manage from the back end?
So the question was around Joomla, being a little tricky and a CMS to make it easier to manage from the back end. I think depending on what functionality you need, WordPress is probably the easiest to manage in the back end. If you've got a simple website, WordPress would be the easiest to manage. I find with WordPress it's really easy to do simple things, but sometimes if you need more advanced functionality, then you may need to go to something like Drupal or Joomla, and the trade-off is that it can be easier to do some of the more advanced things. But if you want to put up a basic informational website, maybe a couple of contact forms, some blog posts and things like that, WordPress would be fine. I guess the only issue for your organisation is if you're already using Joomla, you'd need to look into, you might need a partner to help you migrate from Joomla to WordPress. But I was doing some mentoring for another organisation the other day, and there are Joomla to WordPress migration tools available which might help. Alright. Now again, a quick look at images for the web. Often people get a bit confused about all the different formats that are available, what they should use, when they should use it. So there are three and a half main formats that we use for web. There's PNG, there's JPEG, or GIF. So GIF is one of the originals, and GIF is a low resolution format, can only store up to 256 colors, but you can do those great/terrible animated GIFs, which can be entertaining, but are probably not necessarily what you want to put on your organization's website. So there is also JPEG, which is probably the most commonly used for photos. One of the great things about JPEG is that it supports millions of colors, but one of the not so great things about JPEG is that when you reduce the quality or reduce the file size, you reduce the quality. So some files, it's a bit of a trade-off. And then we've got PNG. And there's two different versions of PNG, which is why I said 3.5 before. I wasn't crazy. There's PNG 8 and there's PNG 24. And PNG is kind of like a high-resolution alternative to GIFs, but a PNG 8 is very similar to GIFs in a lot of ways. When you move to a PNG 24, you get better transparency support. Now you can see in the image on the right there, I've got three different pictures. One's a GIF, one's a PNG, and one's a JPEG. And you can get an idea from that on the relative difference, the file size. So in this case, we've got a GIF on the left, and that's 11.7 kilobytes. We've got a PNG 8, or an 8-bit PNG in the middle, which is only 6.4K. And we've got a JPEG on the end, which is 19.3. Now in this particular example, because the image is relatively flat, it's not a photo, it's a drawing somebody's done, there isn't a lot of difference in quality. But there is a difference in the file size. So in this case, what I would do is I would use the PNG 8 version. Because really what we want to do is we want to keep our file sizes as low as possible so that our website loads as fast as possible for our audience, and we're using the lowest amount of space on our server and using less bandwidth. Now, the way that I decide usually what file format to use is I use the Photoshop function Save for Web. It's included in a couple of other tools in the range like Illustrator, but what Save for Web lets me do is it lets me bring up the image that I've designed, and I can go, all right, well, this is what it'll look like if it's a PNG 24, this is what it'll look like as a PNG 8, this is a JPEG, and this is a GIF, and it'll also show me the expected file size. And using that information, I can make a decision on what I think is the ultimate compromise between the file size and the file quality. If I was doing a photo, I'd never do a GIF, but you know, if I was doing a button, I might want to look at a difference between a GIF and a PNG. Now, Photoshop Elements is available through the Adobe donation program if your organization is eligible, and Adobe Creative Cloud is available through our Adobe discount program, which is essentially the newest version of Photoshop, and that would give you the functionality to be able to do that save for web. There are other tools available, but we're not going to deep dive into those today, but those are the basics about what image to use and when. Now, I wasn't going to cover this, but it's a bit of a bugbear of mine, and there's somebody on the webinar who I will contact afterwards to let them know that they're guilty of this. Are your domains set up correctly? Now, you may not have set up your domains. Somebody else may have done that for you and forgotten an important part of your configuration. After the webinar, go to your website and type in the www before it and see what happens. And then do that again, but leave the www off. Now, both should point to the same website, particularly when you leave the www off. It's becoming more and more common as people are getting more and more familiar with the web, and so it needs to be configured correctly. Why does this matter? What am I missing out on? Well, this is a screenshot of one of your webinar websites that I found yesterday. So I went to the website without the www and found this, which is not what you want your visitors to find, and it's not what you want search engines to find. So really important that we get that configuration right. If you're not familiar with setting up domains and setting up domain name records, then hopefully you've got a web host or a domain name provider who can assist you with that. It doesn't take very long, so it should be something that they'll be prepared to do for free for you. Do we have any questions on that? This one?
Okay, we've just got a comment that worth pointing out that it'd be good to secure the alternatives now.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. So the question is around some of the alternative domain names that are popping up, particularly in New Zealand as they start to shift away from the .org.nz and just using .nz. I was reading this week that over in Australia, the Australian Domain Name Authority are looking at doing the same thing and just dropping the .com or the .org and making it just .au. It's worth looking into different domain names that your organisation could be referred to. Because we're not-for-profit organisations, we may prioritise .org.au or .org.nz, but people may refer to us by .com.au or .co.nz or whatever it is. I mean, in our case, we operate in multiple countries, so we just use .org, but we use .com.au to redirect back to our website. So there are a few different options there. Have a look at what is available. It's also a bit about protecting your name. A few options there. Thanks for that question. Now, in terms of consistency, there's a few little design things that we can look at, and they just help the user experience, and they help the user understand that they're on the same website and help them find what they're looking for. So one of those things is navigation. Most of the websites I looked at, I went through and did some research on about half of your websites, and most of them the navigation was pretty consistent. So that might be that you have a top-level menu across the top of the website, but then you might have a secondary menu on the left-hand side when you dive into the individual sections of your website. That's all fine, but if you're using that secondary menu on the left-hand side, just make sure it's on the left-hand side in all sections of your website, just so that users always know where to find it. And the same thing goes for the footer. If you're going to use a footer, Make sure it's on every page. Make sure it is where it's expected to be found, as in the bottom. Probably not much point putting your footer at the top of the page. And make sure it's got the appropriate links in it. I'll look at a couple more examples afterwards. Where your search box is positioned should also be consistent, because that way if somebody's looking for something in particular and they can't find it, they can go and use search. Now, research has found that users typically look in the top right for the search box, so that's probably the ideal place to put it, somewhere around there. Also things like headings, your use of headings and the position of headings. We're going to talk about headings in a lot more detail in Friday's SEO webinar, but headings, font, color, and alignment and spacing of fonts and objects, those things should be consistent across your website. And if you're using a content management system, that's a lot easier to achieve because you've got a central design, but also those things should be consistent with your branding as well, so that people know that it's your website and they don't get there and get a completely glaring experience. Now, I couldn't find a picture of a train, unfortunately, but getting on the mobile train. So mobile internet use continues to have explosive growth. I'm sure that there's a lot of people on this webinar that are using smartphones, and I'm sure that at least one of you has used a smartphone from time to time to look at a website. Now, because this mobile internet use has grown so substantially, Google have changed their algorithm as of yesterday, so that they will give preference to mobile-friendly sites. So what that means is if somebody is searching for your organization on their mobile phone and you don't have a mobile-friendly website, then your website is potentially not going to rank as highly as other people's websites. Now, there will be exceptions to this. There will be things like if people are searching for your organization's name in particular, you're still going to rank relatively high for that, unless it's a bit generic. But if somebody's looking for dog adoption, then an organization with a mobile-friendly site is going to be prioritized over an organization that doesn't. Now, there are two different ways to adopt mobile. One of them, which has probably been popular for the in the last 4 or 5 years, is a dedicated mobile site, which is what you get when you go to our website on your mobile. That isn't related to, the design isn't related to our desktop site. It's a completely separate design specifically for mobiles. But that mobile theme is installed on our content management system, so it pulls out our usual content. The other option is a responsive website. And what we mean by a responsive website is a website that scales to different size screens, no matter whether it's a nice big high resolution screen or whether it's a teeny tiny little mobile screen. And there are some really great case studies available now of responsive design. It needs to be well thought out, but responsive design is a lot more adopted, than 3 years ago when it first started emerging. So there's lots of examples, there's lots of frameworks and things that you can adopt. So if you are looking at redoing your website, then responsive design, I would suggest, is probably a must. There may be some specific reasons why you may want a specific mobile site. For us, we adopted a mobile site because we didn't want to do a full redesign. So that mobile site for us is about 2 years old, but we are underway with a redesign of our website which is completely responsive. It gives, for us, it gives the best experience for our clients, regardless of whether they're on a computer, whether they're on a laptop, whether they're on a tablet, or whether they are on that smaller mobile site. Now, I've picked the WWF as an example here because they're an organisation that I think does an excellent job of this responsive website. So you can see here that they've got a predictable header across the 3 bigger screens, but when they go down to the smaller size, they've used a white header because it matches with the logo positioning on the other sites, but they've also used this small little, some people call it a hamburger icon, which has become known as a menu icon, and from there they can expand it down and get the menu that they've got on the desktop sites. You can also see that they've got 2 actions up here that they want you to follow. One's donate. I can't read the other one, to be honest. But those key actions stay just under the menu, just under the top bar. So regardless of what screen they're looking at the website on, their visitors are getting those key messages and those key actions that are required. So just before we move on, have we got any questions? Just one?
Can you add responsive site with redesigning your site?
So we've got a question here about adding a responsive site without redesigning your website. You can if you're using a content management, well, actually, probably depends on how your current website is designed. So if you wanted to change your existing theme to be responsive, that is possible in some cases. If your website wasn't designed as responsive from the outset, then what I'd probably suggest is it's going to be more effort than it's worth to modify that theme to be responsive. What I would probably suggest is you look at redoing the entire theme. What you can do without redesigning your theme, though, is adopt that mobile-friendly website. Somebody's asked me for an example of a mobile-friendly website. I haven't put any into this presentation, but what I will do is I will take a screenshot of ours and I will go back and I will look at that at the end of the webinar. The other thing you can do is just pull up your mobile phone when you get a chance and just go to our website, connectingup.org, and you will see the mobile-friendly website staring back at your face. I've taken that screenshot and that should be synced onto my computer shortly. Okay, so just quickly on website structure, we need to consider the structure of our website so that the information on our website is where our visitors are expecting it to be. We need it to be easy to navigate so they can find the information that they need, and again, perform those actions that we want them to take. So we may think that we've designed the best site in the world and the behaviours are easy for us to follow, but we're a bit close to it. So it may be a bit more difficult for somebody who's external to our organisation to take those behaviours. Good idea to test on your friends. If you're a real nerd, you can go to a barbecue with a tablet and you can show people there. But it's useful data, useful to know. Now, we want the structure of the website and the menu structure as well. We want that to be clean and simple for our users to navigate, but also for search engines to crawl. We want them to understand the structure of our website so that our links are appearing in search results and search engines are giving us the joy that we need in search results. And again, we're going to go through that a lot more on Friday. Now, in terms of our URL structure, these should also be clean and clear. These days we can use clean URLs on pretty much all the content management systems. So our links will be things like /about/ this is an article about dog adoption. And they should include relevant keywords. Now we'll do more on what is a relevant keyword on Friday, but nice, easy to use, easy to remember URLs are more likely to be shared, more likely to be understood by search engines and people. Depending on how complex your website structure is, breadcrumbs can assist with navigation. So if you're not sure what a breadcrumb is, it usually appears in the top of the website, maybe just underneath a menu if you've got a big horizontal menu. and just shows the user where they are in the structure of your website. So if they are in About, and then they might be at About Your Staff, and that allows them to go back easily if they want. Now you may be saying, well, they can just use a back button, but you have to remember that because of the way that search engines work, your visitors aren't necessarily coming to your website via your homepage. If somebody searches your website, searches for RSPCA CEO, they might come into your website via your About the Staff page that has information about your CEO, and then want to find out more information about your organisation. So that breadcrumb can help you with people who are coming into your website, and also people who are already on your website that need a bit more help with their navigation. And lastly, sitemaps, and as with the other couple, we are going to cover these in a lot more detail on Friday, but it's important to have an XML sitemap for search engines and a HTML sitemap for people so that they can find things on your website. Now, the XML for search engines is usually, these days, can be done with a module for your content management system, which we'll look at later. And they need to be submitted to the search engines so that search engines know that you've got it and where it is and how they can make use of it. But here's an example I prepared earlier. Now, if you haven't visited before, this is off the White House website, whitehouse.gov. And the White House do a fantastic job of running websites which are easy to navigate, easy to use. As an aside, they're built in Drupal. And you can see here that every page on the website is easily laid out. Not every news article, that's not really essential, but they do have the news articles underneath the issues column, which is this one here. So it makes it easy for people to navigate around. One thing they do, which is probably a little bit excessive, is it appears on the footer of every website. You could quite easily get away with just a sitemap link in your footer that takes you to a page that has all that information on it. And we've got here someone, Google will be showing breadcrumb trails on the new optimized mobile search results. That's possible. They only rolled out yesterday. We haven't had a good look at them yet. But I would suspect so. So another reason why you need those breadcrumb trails. Now, that's it for the first half of the webinar. Have we got any questions on any of that before we move on to Google Analytics? No. Okay, we can come back. I've got a cool slide at the end about questions. So this is Google Analytics. Hopefully you're all using it. I hope. It's free, which is a really good reason to use it. But the amount of data you can get about your website, about how people are using it, and information that isn't just relevant to your website, but information that has implications to offline things like where you run events or gaps in your market. This is basically the homepage of Google Analytics. Once you've logged in, this is the audience overview. You can see straight away it's telling me sessions, so how many visits have been on my website. Shows me how many users have been on my website. So you can see there's about an 11,000 person difference between users and sessions. That's probably because a percentage of those users have visited more than once in the last month. So they've had more than one session. And again, with page views, those 43,000 users have viewed 180,000 page views. So more than one page. In fact, it's 3.29 pages per session. It tells me how long they've been on the website and the bounce rate, so the percentage of people that visit our website and leave straight away. Now, our bounce rate is a little bit high for our website because it incorporates our directory, and as a general rule, directories have a higher bounce rate than a normal website. What you should be aiming for with your website is about a 30 to 50% bounce rate, no more than 50% usually. And for us, the percentage of new sessions, 71% of those 54,500 sessions are new. So that shows us that we've actually been doing a lot of outreach in the last couple of months, so that shows us that's starting to pay off and we're starting to get more people in. So Google Analytics is all about understanding your audience through data. So you install a little bit of tracking code on your website and all of a sudden you get information about where your audience are. So where they are in the country, in the state, what city they're in, what browser they use, which is important if you're having compatibility issues, whether they're using mobiles, tablets or desktop computers, and what kind as well, which is really useful data if you're looking at a mobile app of some description. Rather than going with the industry metrics, which at the moment are about 50-50 split between Android and Apple, and then a percentage of Microsoft, about 5% Microsoft, your audience could be 70% Apple, 20% Android and 10% Microsoft. Or your audience could be 60% Microsoft. But that data is going to tell you what mobile devices people are using to access your website, and from there you can make decisions around what kind of devices. Also make decisions around how high a priority mobile usage is to your organization. And also, and this is relatively new, things like demographics. So you can now find the age and the gender of people that are visiting your website and some of their interests. Now remember, Google have an abundance of data about all of us. It's scary in a lot of ways, but that data, there is a percentage of it that's publicly available. And to give you an idea for our website, it actually shows us the percentage that we get demographic data for. And in the last month, there's 7% of our visitors we've been able to get some form of demographics data for. And it's useful for our marketing, it's useful for understanding our messaging, it's useful for a whole range of different things. It also lets you understand how your audience got to your website. I said before that they don't necessarily come through your homepage anymore, so it lets you see how they are getting to your website, what landing pages they're accessing. It lets you see what social media channels are driving traffic to your website, what search queries people are using to find your organization, what keywords they might be using, and that helps you craft a keyword strategy, which I've said it before, Friday, join us. And it helps you integrate your AdWords campaigns so you can see which AdWords campaigns are most successful for your organization, and the source, so where they come from, whether they come from Google, whether they come from Bing, whether they come from a partner's website. There's a whole range of different ways that they can come through to your website, and you don't have to guess anymore. You can know straight away by looking at your Google Analytics data. It also helps you understand what your audience did on your website, which is really useful in terms of improving your website, making it easier to use. So it can show you popular content, which can help you craft your content strategy. If you're putting up blog posts on a particular topic that no one's reading, perhaps it's time to reconsider what topics you're covering in your blog. You can look at the navigation flow to see how people are finding particular pages on your website, and if they're taking too long to get to pages that you want them to get to, you can use that information to adjust your navigation. Where they exited, if you have a series of pages that people need to go through before they can make a donation, and they're exiting on one page in particular without making a donation, perfect data, you can optimize that page, you can do a lot of work to it to try and improve that flow, and you can measure the effect over time. And we can also set up conversions. Not really going to cover conversions today, it's probably more of a advanced Google Analytics feature, but it can allow you to measure whether visitors to your website convert to become a member or a donor or a customer or whatever you need them to do. So it's about understanding. It's about understanding who is visiting, whether they marry up with what you're expecting and what they're doing, so that you can make your website a better experience for your visitors, which ultimately will make them more likely to take the actions that you need them to take. Now, when I was talking about understanding what they're doing on your website, this is our website. Looks familiar. And this is a function called in-page analytics, which you can now actually do with a Google Chrome extension. And what this is showing us is on our homepage what links are the most popular with people, which can help us optimize what's going on our website. Really useful data for us at the moment because, as I mentioned, we are redoing our website. So I can see here, up here it shows me on a graph the blue areas, the areas that not many people are clicking on. It's like 0.1% of clicks on the homepage, and the red areas are more of the clicks, so up to 19%. So we can see that only 1.7% of our visitors are clicking on the directory link. Maybe we don't need that directory link there. Maybe we can move that. We can see 2.2% are getting information about becoming a member, and that's something that's only new to the website, so that may be something that, rather than remove that, that is the key action that we want people to take on our website. We want them to register, we want them to take advantage of all of the great programs we've got, so that may be something that we will need to optimize. We get information about our tech donations, so our tech donation is one of the key links on the homepage, so that may need a bit more prominence. So this is giving us information about what people are doing here. It shows us in the last month we've had 9,800 visits to this page. So, we were saying before we've had 178,000 page views in total. Only 9,800 of them were to the homepage, which is 5.5% of the total. It shows us how many of those were unique, how long people stayed on this page for, how many left straight away. So remember before I was saying that we want our bounce rate to be between 30 and 50%. Well, under 30 is even better. So we can see that our homepage is under 25%, great result for us. And our exit rate is very low as well. This is 25%. So it tells us that the majority of people that go to this website go further into the website as a result. Great data for us to have, and it can help us optimize this homepage. And like I said, some of these things we may want to readjust where they're at. So if you don't use Google Analytics or you don't look at this report very often, this can be a really useful way to sort of shake up some preconceived notions about what's going on. Yay, I've got a great website, everybody can find what they need, but then I go to the homepage and find that they're not actually doing what I want them to do. And this is information that we can use to customize that and get them doing what we need them to do. Get them making those important donations or registering for our programs. Now, if you're not using Google Analytics, it's relatively easy to set up. It's free. You can sign up at analytics.google.com. You will need a Google ID, which probably most of us have got these days, but I'd recommend an organization one. And you can set up user accounts later on so that multiple users in your organization can access the data. And then you can set up an analytics property. It's pretty much step by step these days. And you'll get a tracking ID, which is in the form of what I've written there. So that's not too bad. So this is probably the way that most of us used to install Google Analytics on our website. This is the tracking code. If you don't understand code, then you probably go, nah, I don't really want to do that. It's a bit hard. So what we do now is we use modules for our content management systems. So a couple that I would recommend here, if you're using WordPress, there's a Google Analytics by Yoast plugin, which you can get on that URL, and then you just copy and paste that tracking ID into there, and it takes care of all the heavy lifting, takes care of a lot of the updates as Google make changes to their analytics code, and it also point and click enables things like download tracking and universal analytics, which has just come through. Emma's just asked, how can you see download stats on PDFs? Well, there are a range of different ways. If you're using a content management system, one thing that I really like about Google Analytics by Yoast is it has an option there to just click how you want to track downloads of files like PDFs. Because you can't, you can't put the Google Analytics tracking code in a PDF, which is another reason not to use PDFs on your website. But what you can do now is you can track when people download the PDFs. So if you're not using a content management system, then it's a bit more complicated. Maybe send me an email afterwards and I'll send you a link to the extra information. But that's another reason to use these content management systems. They're so the modules. They're so much easier to be able to set up things like that. And with Drupal, there's a module called Google Analytics. It's really originally named, and that will put the code on your website. Now, it's great that we can track our website, but how can we track campaigns that aren't necessarily on our website? How can we track where our traffic is coming from? Well, there's a way of doing it with Google Analytics by adding some text to the end of links that we use in, say, newsletters and things like that. So there's 5 key properties we can set up here. One is the source. So the source may be the link where it was published, and these are all pretty much information for us. So Google will put the information into Google Analytics if it measures traffic coming to your website using that data at the end of the URL, and which is great. So it means that we don't have to worry about making sure it's unique or whatever it needs to be. We need to understand ultimately what the source was. In terms of the medium, it's useful to make the medium something consistent. So if it was an email newsletter, I would use email. If it was a AdWords campaign, Google used the CPC medium and gives us data on how many people are coming in as a result of cost per click ads. We can add the terms that we're using for search so that the keyword is marked in Google Analytics. We can look at the content. So, you know, there may be specialist examples where we're doing A/B testing. Google do have some tools for that, and particular content targeted ads, and also a name so that we've got a record of it in our system. So that all seems really complicated. The basics are the ones that I've put a star next to. Where's my mouse? So the source, medium, and name, they're the compulsory ones. They're the minimum ones. And you can actually go to this link at the bottom of this slide, which will be sent out after the webinar, to build your own URL. So what I do is I bookmark the URL builder, and I just click on it and I build a URL whenever I need one. And then you can use things like bit.ly or other URL shorteners to shorten that to something nice and sweet. So you see in my example here, I've made up a rspca.org.au/adopt-a-dog and then lots of analytics tracking at the end. What I may do is I may change that to a bit.ly link that is bit.ly/adopt-a-dog and redirects to that full URL. It's also useful if you're putting URLs on Facebook or Twitter to be able to add things like source is Facebook or source is June Facebook post or something like that, to be able to track the amount of traffic that's coming to your website from social in a lot more detail, and then use those short URLs to summarize them. And then Google Analytics gives you this great report here which shows all of your campaigns, and you can see here I've got some campaigns which are our newsletters, and if you're using a tool like MailChimp, it usually does this campaign tracking for you. You just tick a box when you're building your newsletter. But you can see here these top 2 that are driving the most people to our website. Those 2 I know are AdWords campaigns. So AdWords gets integrated with analytics so that I can track everything in one place. So it gives me information about what people are doing as a result of clicking on that. So I know that I got 209 sessions. I know that only 32% of them were new sessions, but it's one of our newsletters, so I wouldn't expect a high percentage. how many bounced, how many pages they visited, etc. It gives us all that same data. So now that we have heaps of data, what do we do with it? Does the data match our assumptions of what our users are doing? So that's a big thing. We build these websites because we think this is what our customers need. We think that they're easy to follow, but does the data match that? Are the pages we think are as popular as they should be? Or are the pages we need to be popular as they should be? Maybe they're not easy to find. Maybe that donate link on the homepage doesn't have a high percentage of click-throughs. What devices should we target? I gave you the example before about the mobile apps. So these are the kind of things that we can start to look at with this data. We can start to prioritize our actions as well. We can find out what pages are the most popular and make sure that they're easy to find in the navigation. We'll make sure that, if they're driving people to our website, we've got the right links on that page to drive people through. Are our visitors finding our website easy to navigate? We can look at that in-page analytics heat map and see where people are clicking. Is it where we want them to click? Are our visitors performing the behaviours you need them to? So maybe you're getting a lot of traffic to your donations page but no donations. Well, we can measure that and we can make informed decisions. But we can also do some things that aren't quite so relevant to our website. So things like the performance of our campaigns. So is our marketing working? What campaigns and mediums are best? We can use that URL builder to build a URL that we don't put on our printed collateral, but we put the bit.ly version or the shortened version on our collateral. Are people actually using that URL that we put on our collateral? Is the demographic on our website what we would expect? Maybe we are a youth-focused non-profit that 90% of our traffic on our website are parents, 45 to 60-year-olds. Those are the kind of things that we can look at, and then we can customize our content to relate to that demographic. Who is driving driving traffic to our website? Is it coming from partners? Is it coming from search engines? How can we adapt to that and take advantage of that? Make sure people aren't getting lost in our navigation. And also, is our content being read? People reading for a short time and leaving our website, bouncing or exiting. These are the things that we can use to then improve on our website. Now, that's the end of the formal section of the webinar. I have a couple more things that I'll cover quickly, but if you've got any questions, fire them through now. We've got 1 minute, but I'll stay on the webinar if we've got any questions. While people are thinking about their questions, I mentioned that we have another webinar on Friday, and that is on search engine optimization basics. So that's probably a step on top of the essentials. And now that we've got Google Analytics on our website, now that we can use that data to inform what we're doing, we look at things like site speed, webmaster tools, site maps and submitting them to search engines, keywords, content, what we need to do with our content, structures of websites, and also some differences between Bing and Google. So that webinar will be free, and that will be on Friday, and you can register at that URL, which we'll send out afterwards. And again, that will be relatively basic. If you've got anything in particular that you want me to cover, you can send that through in an email. My email address is rj@connectingup.org. I've almost finished it, but I'm happy to add things. So we've had a question here about sending more information about tracking campaigns. That URL builder link that I put on that slide has a lot of information about that, but if you send through specific questions, I'll be happy to give you a hand, and we can look at how we can track those campaigns, because it kind of depends on whether they're online or offline campaigns. So no more questions at the moment. if you do need a bit more help and you want some answers customized to your organization, we actually do 1 hour of free mentoring with our premium membership. So I've actually done some mentoring for a few organizations lately on websites, having a look at their website in particular and some key actions that we can take to improve interactivity, to improve response. So that mentoring is free with the premium membership, plus you get a whole range of other great stuff, including a discount on our conferences, discounts on paid webinars and workshops, promoting your events on our website, all sorts of information. So if you haven't got a premium membership, it's $150 a year, and you can get more information on the website. And I know a couple of people on the webinar have done those mentoring sessions lately, so I think they're quite valuable if you're sort of struggling, need some customized information. We have a couple of conferences coming up, one in Australia and one in New Zealand. And I've picked out a couple of sessions which are relevant to this. We're going to do a bit more of a deep dive on Google Analytics and some of the different things, a bit of a walkthrough. And we've also got a great keynote speaker talking about trends in non-profit technology and other useful tools. So that's the Wellington conference in New Zealand. And at the moment, if you purchase 2 full-time conference registrations, you get the 3rd one for free. There's also our Connecting Up conference in Australia. We're really excited this year because it's in Adelaide and that's our hometown. So you get to come out and spend some time with us in our neighbourhood, see the office and have a good time. So that's a 2-day conference, so there's a bit more here in terms of social media tools and Facebook content, as well as those other 2 sessions. So that conference, you purchase 2 full-time conference registrations at the moment, and you'll get 50% off the 3rd, which would be really, really useful if you're looking at going with a couple of colleagues. And I am genuinely recommending those. I'll be at both of them, so you can corral me in the corner and pummel me with questions until I can't take any more. That will be A-OK. And there's also a couple of masterclasses which will be relevant. And the last thing I just want to touch on, because we haven't got any more questions, but if any more come through, we'll take them, is just Google for Nonprofits. If you're not aware, Google for Nonprofits has launched in Australia and New Zealand. It's free to register, and the big headline here is that you get a $10,000 AdWords grant per month for your organisation to advertise itself on Google. And that AdWords data gets fed straight into analytics, and you get very good in-depth stats on that. So I've got the Australian URL there. The New Zealand URL is google.co.nz/nonprofit/join. Also get Google Apps for Nonprofits and YouTube for Nonprofits. Free to register, and $10,000 of free advertising per month sounds pretty good to me. We don't have any more questions, but feel free to send them through. Thanks everyone for participating today. Emma's microphone has died, so I get the great job of thanking you all. We'll be sending an email out to you after the webinar with a link to the recording, as well as a copy of the presentation slides. For those in Australia and New Zealand, make sure you check out those conference websites. I'm not biased. I can genuinely recommend them. They're very sociable, and you'll get a lot of good takeaways. And there are some great deals at the moment for passes. So thanks everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.